Hello, scholars of room 502. It's been a long time since we've been in room 502. But let's get out our text for close reading. Remember, if you don't have one of these, we're going to do the other unit. So you'll still have time to follow along. We'll just have your parent give me a text message or an email, and we'll get one out in the mail to you. Okay, because we're going to finish this booklet. Might go a little bit past the end of the school year, but that's okay. Isn't it? All right. Let's see what we got going here. We're going to go to way back. Oh, I want to review this. Our essential question. What do we learn when we look at the world through the eyes of others? And remember, that's kind of the point of view lesson that we've been talking about. So let's start with Here Boy on page 4. And we're going to read paragraphs 1 through 2 and make some little notations. This is a fresh copy I have. Huh, where's my other one with all the marking? Let's see what I put beforehand. Here we go. I want to see how filled up our story. Wow. Let's use this one instead. All right, we're going to reread paragraphs 1 and 2. You can follow along with me. At first, I didn't see a dot. Oh, and what we're doing is we're showing how the narrative points of view in each text different. We're going to identify at least 3 differences and provide examples of each. So we're going to look at how they're different. Here Boy and Quiet. So here we go. At first, I didn't see a dog. There was just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor. Tomatoes and onions and green peppers. And then was what seemed like a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees running around waving their arms, just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly, and he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out and he was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that is what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. So we're going to stop. Are we going to read one more paragraph? Yeah, let's read one more paragraph. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog." So we can see that this is first-person point of view, right? And something that's in the first-person point of view is the pronoun I. We already circled that. So that's one difference between this and a third-person point of view. I'm going to go up here by Here Boy, and I'm going to say uses I. That's a big part of the first-person point of view. I did this, I saw that, I smelled that, I touched that, and so on. So it uses the word I. Also, since this is coming from a little girl's point of view, the language isn't formal. It's very informal because she's just talking how she normally talks, right? Maybe if she was a college professor or a politician, she'd have a different tone in her voice, but she's a little girl and she is speaking informal language. So we put informal language. Okay, it's not formal language. There's not there's not any figurative language happening or really descriptive language. So we also just see it from her perspective. Notice the manager screams, "Somebody grab that dog." And further on, she said, "You could," and the manager must have been having a bad day because lying there on the floor right in front of everybody, he started to cry. Maybe he wasn't having a bad day. Maybe he wasn't having a bad day until Winn-Dixie showed up at this Winn-Dixie. So what we're going to put up here is from one point of view. It's only what this little girl Opal is seeing and sensing that the story's coming from. She's making all the calls. So those are 3 ways that a first-person point of view is different from a third-person point of view. We're going to go visit the third-person point of view on Quiet, and we're going to read paragraphs 1 through 3 of Quiet. Excuse me, sniffles and allergies are really killing me. So let's turn to page 13. And here we go. In Lad, the real world was hounded by the place. Outside there was a certain number of miles of land, and there were an uncertain number of people. But the miles were uninspiring except for a cross-country tramp with a master, and the people were foolish and strange folk who either stared at him, which always annoyed Lad, or else tried to pat him, which he hated. But the place was the place. Always he had lived on the place. He felt he owned it. It was assuredly his to enjoy, to guard, to patrol from high road to lake. It was his world. The denizens of every world must have at least one deity to worship. Remember that word deity is a god? Lad had one of the master, indeed. Lad had one, the master. Indeed, he had two, the master and the mistress. And because the dog was strong of soul and chivalric withal, and because the mistress was altogether lovable, Lad placed her altar, or worship place, even above the master's, which was holy as it should have been. So here we have a third person point of view, right? It's much different, the language, isn't it totally different? So we're going to write down the first part like we did with Here Boy. It uses I. This does not use I. The only time in a third person point of view that would use I is maybe if the narrator was discussing or writing about a conversation someone had. I did this, I did that. But it's not from that person's point of view. So it does not use I. And think about this language. The denizens, or citizens of every world, must have at least one deity to worship. So it's very formal language. It's formal. So we're going to write formal language. And the really big difference also, another big difference, not really big difference, is in third person, the narrator knows all, or at least he tells you what he wants you to know. So in the first person, all we get is Opal's viewpoint of what's happening in the Winn-Dixie. In Quiet, we can see everything that's happening. You know, he goes right inside Lad's head here and talks about like how Lad feels about the place, how Lad feels about the place, and how Lad feels about its owners. So we're going to put knows. Let's put knows all. Or knows all that he wants to tell the reader. So Opal can only guess what other people are feeling, like the manager's having a bad day, the dog is the happiest dog. She can only go from her perspective, her point of view. But this third person point of view, it kind of spreads out and it can let you know what people are thinking and everything that's happening. Because Opal didn't know there was a dog running loose in the Winn-Dixie until she got inside and saw it, and she was able to tell us. He knows what's happening. He knows what's happening behind the door when Lad can't go inside, that the mistress has pneumonia. He knows that the man's a doctor, and so on and so on. So we're going to stop there for today. Remember your writing assignment. Remember all those great notes we took? I'd love to see you write something and send it to me in a doc, a Word Google Doc. And remember yesterday we discussed the setting. Pony Ranch, quiet, sunny, not as fancy as the place. And we talked about the characters, Lad, aloof, snobby, follows orders, and Misty is quiet and happy, and the hen is not scared of others. And the two ponies, Billy Blaze and Watch Eyes, are young, eager, and friendly. And remember our notes talked about the beginning. Lad arrives at Pony Ranch, and I will use this event to introduce, describe Lad, Pony Ranch, and the animals there. And remember, we started writing this. And you could copy mine to get you started, or you could start on your own. And after a long ride on the train, I found myself at a quiet place called Pony Ranch. And who's I in this case? Remember, we're writing from Lad's point of view. I was dropped off and met my new master. He led me to a field and told me I would be guarding all of the animals. He told me to go and explore the ranch. This place was not as fancy as my old home. I saw two silly ponies playing in the field. I looked around and saw a shed. There was a horse looking out of the opening of the shed. She seemed quite happy. I walked closer to the shed and noticed a hen that seemed not to fear other animals. So we're getting this from Lad's point of view, and he doesn't know if the horse is happy. He only seems to think she's happy. And he's making judgments about the ponies that they're silly. And he doesn't know for sure that the hen's not afraid of others, but that's his perception of it, his point of view. So you could use this to start your writing. You can always freeze frame to copy on your Google Doc. And then tomorrow we're going to start tackling the middle. We'll talk a little bit more about the middle and the ending. And then we'll start a new unit. Hooray! Have a great Monday.